Non posso, Lucia, sto facendo una conferenza.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you may be, and welcome to a new Taiji Man case webinar. Before we reflect on yesterday, World Press Freedom Day, it is important to remember that United Nations observed another significant day just a few weeks ago on April 7, the International Day of Reflection on the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda. We typically do not hold a webinar for that day, but perhaps we should. In the last two webinars, I shared my trip to Rwanda earlier this year. I continue to study the genocide against the Tutsi, where about 1 million people lost their lives in around 100 days. It remains one of the most devastating events of the 20th century, and its effects still shape Africa today. That genocide is also a major reason for the long and tragic war in Eastern Congo. When the genocidal regime in Rwanda fell, many of those responsible for the killings fled across the border, promising revenge and reorganizing militarily. Their presence in Congo sparked a series of conflicts, including invasions by the post-genocide Rwandan army. It contributed to a regional war that resulted in an estimated 5 million additional deaths. The scale of this tragedy is nearly impossible to grasp. Even after spending time in Rwanda, speaking with survivors and religious leaders, I remain shocked at how many aspects of the genocide still defy easy explanation. One of the most troubling aspects of the Rwandan genocide is that it was not carried out by a single political party or specialized military units, as it was the case in the Holocaust. Most of the perpetrators were ordinary citizens. They were neighbors, colleagues, sometimes friends of those they killed. Some of the murdered people they had known for years. Some even killed their own spouses. This shocking reality continues to astonish the witnesses I interviewed in Rwanda. They struggle to understand how a society could unravel so quickly. How people who had lived side by side could suddenly turn against each other with such brutality. I do not claim to have an answer to a question that has baffled many books and decades of research. However, I agree with most scholars of the genocide that the media were one of the primary causes. At that time, the media landscape in Rwanda was largely controlled by the Hutu-led government and by extremist Hutu factions. These outlets spread a constant stream of hate speech against the Tutsi minority. It is important to clarify that Tutsi and Hutu are not tribes in the simplistic sense often used in Western reporting. They are ethnosocial groups with remote but real different historical roots, traditionally linked to different economic roles. Pastoralists in the case of the Tutsi, agriculturalists in the case of the Hutu. By the 1990s, this distinction had turned into rigid political labels, and the media played a key role in transforming them into tools of hatred. Day after day, magazines like Kangura and radio stations like the notorious Radio-Télévision Libre de Mille Collines spread messages portraying Tutsi as enemies, traitors, and threats to existence. One infamous broadcast urged listeners to cut down the tall trees, a phrase that became a coded call for murder. This constant poisoning of public discourse produced toxic results. It was not the sole case of the genocide, but it was a significant factor, explaining why ordinary people became killers almost overnight. When hate is repeated often enough, loudly enough, and with enough authority, it can reshape the moral landscape of a society. We must not fall into the same trap and blame the Hutu as a collective group. Genocide is never the responsibility of an ethnosocial group as such. It falls on those who plan it, those who incite it, those who carry it out. History reminds us that no group is immune. In Burundi in 1972, an earlier genocide occurred in which Tutsi forces killed large numbers of Hutu civilians. And there too the media helped spread fear and hatred. In Rwanda in 1994, the hate media did not only target the Tutsi, they also targeted moderate Hutu leaders who advocated for peaceful coexistence. Many of these moderates were among the first to die. The lesson is that media that promote hate can be extremely dangerous. They can tear apart the social fabric, undermine coexistence, and pave the way for violence. Hate speech does not always lead to genocide, but it always comes before genocide. Once the process starts, it is hard to stop. This leads us to the theme of today's webinar. The same dynamics of hate and scapegoating seen in Rwanda, though obviously on a much larger scale there, can also be observed in how certain groups are labeled as cults in various countries. When the media adopt hostile narratives, repeat unverified accusations, and portray a minority as dangerous or deviant, the consequences can be severe. Violence is not the only result. Discrimination, bullying, social exclusion, and lasting reputation damage can also occur. The Taiji Men case is a painful example. After the case was fabricated in 1996, a wave of media coverage followed. Scores of articles appeared, many of them merely parroting the theories of the prosecutor who invented it. They repeated the false argument that Taiji Men was guilty of fraud and tax evasion, an argument that eventually collapsed at trial. But this slanderous media campaign caused enormous undue suffering for Taiji Men's disciples. Of course, the Taiji Men case cannot be compared to a genocide, but the underlying mechanism, the use of media to stigmatize a group, is the same. The truth is that we do not know how far the impact of media hate speech can reach. Rwanda in 1994 serves as a tragic reminder that it can extend very far indeed. Hate speech in the media should be stopped when it starts. It should have been halted in Rwanda. It should have been halted in Burundi. It should also have been halted in the Taiji Men case, but it wasn't. This is one reason the case remains unresolved today. As we reflect on World Press Freedom Day, let us remember that freedom of the press is both a right and a responsibility. The media have the power to inform, educate, and protect. But they also have the power to divide, inflame, and harm. The lesson from Rwanda and Burundi and from the Taiji Men case is that the media must use their power wisely. When they spread hate, the consequences can be devastating. When they act responsibly, they can help build a more just and peaceful world. Let this webinar remind us of the importance of responsible communication, the need for vigilance against hate speech, and the obligation to protect vulnerable minorities from the destructive power of false narrative. And this was a sober introduction to the difficult theme of today's webinar. Another aspect, of course, is threats and the killing of journalists. And these are themes dominating the message of United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres on the World Press Freedom Day. So we will now have a video with Secretary Guterres' official message.
People often say that in war, truth is the first casualty. But far too frequently, the first casualties are the journalists who risk everything to report that truth, not only in war, but wherever those in power fear scrutiny. Across the globe, media workers risk censorship, surveillance, legal harassment, and even death. Recent years have seen a sharp rise in the number of journalists killed, often deliberately targeted in war zones. 85% of the crimes committed against journalists go uninvestigated and unpunished, an unacceptable level of impunity. Economic pressures, new technologies, and active manipulation are also putting press freedom under unprecedented strain. When access to reliable information erodes, mistrust takes root. When public debate is distorted, social cohesion weakens. And when journalism is undermined, crises become far more difficult to prevent and resolve. All freedom depends on press freedom. Without it, there can be no human rights, no sustainable development, and no peace. On this World Press Freedom Day, let us protect the rights of journalists and build a world where the truth and truth tellers are safe.
Thank you, and we can now start the first session, which will feature two papers. And the first is from Stefania Cerruti, who is External Relations Manager of the Major Emergency and Disasters International School. So, Stefania, the floor is yours.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to everybody, depending on where you are. In disaster management, we often say that information can save lives. However, we also know that when information is distorted, sensationalized, or used as a weapon, it can cause harm equal to or greater than the disaster itself. The media play a central role in this balance. They can be a lifeline, offering timely warnings, practical guidance, and reassurance. Yet, they can also heighten fear, spread misinformation, and create convenient villains when societies seek someone to blame. Today, I want to reflect on this dual role and the responsibility that journalists, editors, and public communicators have when engaging with vulnerable community, including religious and spiritual minorities. In every major disaster, whether earthquakes or pandemics, the media becomes the primary lens through which the public interprets events. This is not necessarily negative. In fact, effective communication is vital for reducing disaster risk. When the media act responsibly, they help people understand the risks, adopt protective actions, and maintain social cohesion. They can counter rumors, correct falsehoods, and highlight the need of affected populations. They can also hold authorities accountable when responses are insufficient or discriminatory. However, disaster creates uncertainty, and uncertainty breeds fear. Fear, in turn, leads to a demand for simple explanation and clear culprits. This is where the media's role becomes more complex and riskier. In moments of crisis, the urge to assign blame is powerful, and the media can become a channel through which entire groups are stigmatized. This pattern is not new. Throughout history, epidemics, fires, floods, and social upheavals have been accompanied by narratives blaming minorities for causing or worsening the crisis. What changes over time is not the mechanism, but the speed and scale of these narratives. The COVID-19 pandemic starkly illustrated this dynamic. Worldwide, religious minorities faced accusation of spreading the virus, even when they adhered to the same rules or lack of rules as everyone else. In several countries, religious gatherings were labeled as uniquely irresponsible, while equally large secular events were treated with more leniency. In some instances, the accusation stemmed from misunderstandings. In others, they arose from existing prejudices that the pandemic activated. It is essential to note that the virus did not create hostility toward these groups. It merely provided an opportunity for that hostility to emerge more openly, often fueled by sensationalist headlines and social media. From a disaster management perspective, this scapegoating is counterproductive. It erodes trust, hampers cooperation, and distracts from underlying issues in emergency preparedness. From a human rights perspective, it is even more concerning when the media depict a minority as dangerous, irrational, or socially harmful. The consequences extend well beyond the crisis. Members of these groups may encounter discrimination in workplace, bullying in school, harassment in public spaces, and long-term reputational damage. In extreme case, they may even become targets of violence. This leads me to the second part of my reflection. The parallels between media behavior during disasters and their conduct during political campaigns against unpopular groups. Although the contexts differ, the mechanisms are surprisingly alike. When a government or faction seeks to marginalize a community, the media can become a tool, sometimes willingly, sometimes unknowingly, of that marginalization. Narratives are constructed, repeated, and amplified until they embed themselves in public consciousness. Once a group is labeled as suspicious or harmful, every action it takes is viewed through that lens. The experience of Taiji men in Taiwan is a clear example of this process. After the fabricated criminal case began in 1996 and the leader of Taiji men, his wife, and two Dizzy were detained, a wave of media coverage ensued. Hundreds of articles emerged, many repeating unverified claims or presenting speculations as fact. Instead of exercising caution, media outlets often embraced sensationalism. They portrayed Taiji men as a threat not because of evidence, but because the political environment encouraged such portrayals. The result was predictable. Ordinary members of Taiji men faced discrimination, social exclusion, and bullying. Children were ridiculed in schools. Adults were regarded with suspicion in their workplaces and communities. The damage caused by this media campaign did not cease when the courts eventually cleared Taiji men of all charges. The stigma persisted. As one a narrative takes hold, it is challenging to erase. From the disaster communication perspective, the Taiji men case resembles what occurs when a minority is scapegoated during a natural disaster. In both situations, the media amplify fear rather than alleviate it. They simplify complex realities into emotionally charged narratives. They create an us versus them environment that damages social cohesion. And they overlook the long-term harm caused by irresponsible reporting. What can we learn from these patterns? First, the media possess immense power in shaping public perception during crises, whether those crises are natural, health-related, or political. Second, this power must be exercised responsibly, especially when vulnerable groups are involved. Third, the public also needs to develop media literacy, learning to differentiate between evidence-based reporting and narratives fueled by fear or bias. The COVID-19 pandemic and the Taiji men case may seem unrelated at first glance. Still, they reveal the same underlying truth. When the media scapegoats minorities, the consequences are significant and lasting. Whether the context is a public health emergency or a fabricated tax evasion and fraud case, the mechanism and the resulting harm are the same. As someone who works in disaster management, I have seen how crucial, accurate, fair, and responsible communication is for protecting lives and maintaining social harmony. The media can be a force for good, but only if they choose to be. In conclusion, I hope that the lessons from this experience encourage all of us, professionals, citizens, and institutions, to demand higher standards from our media landscape. Disaster will continue to occur and political tensions will remain. But scapegoating and slander are not inevitable. They are choices. The resilience of Taiji men in the face of persecution and slander teaches us that by choosing responsibility, conscience, and truth, we can create a society that responds to crisis without sacrificing justice or human dignity. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Now,
No, thank you. And we have now a second speaker, who is Mark Nemes, researcher at the Research Institute of Art Theory and Methodology at the Hungarian Academy of Arts, and also serving as Deputy Director of CESNUR. Mark, the floor is yours.
Professor, thank you very much for this session, and thank you very much for inviting me. Freedom of religion is a fundamental human right enshrined in Article 19 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. This article states everyone has the right to freedom of opinion and expression. This right includes freedom to hold opinions without interference and to seek, receive, and impart information and ideas through any media and regardless of frontiers. On May 4th, 2026, only one day after the United Nations World Press Freedom Day, I share my paper with two essential purposes in mind. First, to celebrate the universal human right to impart and receive information without restriction or censorship. It is a foundational right of modernity, one that has been absent for my very own home country, Hungary, over a decade by now, and whose restoration we now eagerly await. The second purpose may be even more important, to remind ourselves of the fragility of this right and the misuse of it, of public influence, which has very real consequences on the lives of persecuted minority communities, groups, and individuals. For this reason, I divide this paper into two parts. First, a reflection on the responsibilities regarding the right to impart information, and second, a reflection on the rights to receive it. In an era where technology enables us to access almost any information with just a few taps whenever and wherever we want, the right to free expression becomes a powerful tool, one that is regularly exploited to overpower lesser heard voices, incite moral panics, and create social scapegoats. The very convenience of modern technology fuels these issues. Algorithms tend to promote attention-grabbing content that triggers negative emotions, further boosting viewership and reach. In media studies, there is an axiom that describes this very phenomenon, stating that there is no bad press. Indeed, when even a single second of attention can be monetized, there is no bad press, not at least financially. But this does not mean that such content benefits society or help inform readers. Sensationalist media often overemphasize elements that appear strange or unfamiliar, while oversimplifying the phenomena they also describe. These misuses of power are occurring in places such as Czechia, South Africa, Japan, South Korea, Argentina, Australia, and many other places targeting new religions such as Misa, the Jehovah's Witnesses, Scientology, Christian Gospel Mission, the Unification Church, Shincheonji, Taijimen, and several other forms of contemporary religiosity and spirituality. Our convenient lifestyles have also created another powerful tool for inciting moral panics. Multimedia products, online film series, podcasts, and many more have far greater retention power because they create emotional connections when misused, as in the case of the Netflix series In the Name of God. These can cause lasting harm and reach vast audiences. In the case of Taijimen, negative media attention focused almost exclusively on the donation practices, misinterpreting gift-giving as tuition fees or for a non-existent cram school. The still inconclusive legal cases and the prosecutor's misrepresentation of the group, which even caused its grandmaster of raising goblins, in quotation marks. Through such portrayals, sensationalist media effectively branded the Taijimen Qigong Academy as a cult, a label that is extremely difficult to remove from public discourse. Beyond the obvious oversimplifications, these articles also sparked widespread fear in Taiwanese society, leading many disciples to abandon their practice and causing divisions within very families. Those who encountered these reports in print or television or later in online form, in their minds, the conceptual image of Taijimen was so damaged that even positive first-hand experiences during cultural festivals or Qigong practices could not counterbalance these preconceptions. In these contexts, scholarly and human rights contributions became crucial for restoring balance. Today, when someone searches Taijiman online, the first results are no longer defamatory or sensationalist pieces, but informative materials from the taijimancase.org site, Bitter Winter, CESNUR, the reports of the European Federation for Freedom of Belief, and the analysis published by Human Rights Without Frontiers. These sources are now correcting global perceptions and shifting attention to human rights abuses and enabling a moderate, value-centered discourse on the Taijimen case and the ongoing injustices this community continues to face. On the other side of the equation lies the issue of freedom to receive information. This is the second part of the paper. Well-financed outlets, media outlets to be precise, may speak louder, though not necessarily wiser, than those who communicate with care and fewer resources. In optimal conditions, individuals can counterbalance this disparity by choosing which outlets they trust and through which lenses they interpret the world around them. However, state censorship can limit citizens' access to information or block their entire connection to global exchanges altogether, restricting them to a curated selection. In recent years, we have seen such practices in China, Russia, and even in parts of the cultural West, though in much more subtle forms. The dangers of this practice are evident, especially when the subjects of curated communications are minority or less understood communities. Mononarrative reporting can incite witch hunts, weaponize social unrest against a particular group. For example, Jehovah's Witnesses, Baptists, Adventists, and many other Protestant and Neo-Protestant churches are depicted in contemporary Russian state media as hubs for Western spies. Those affiliated with these persecuted communities must choose now between facing the consequences of such unfounded accusations or fleeing their very homeland. Narrowed down reporting and intentionally biased media can also create a cascading effect in which countries where a pluralistic media environment exists may adopt these distorted narratives and incorporate them into their own reporting without proper fact-checking. Therefore, freedom of information can function only when combined with other foundational rights that ensure transparency and pluralism, both essential for a well-informed society. States that adhere to the principles of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights must ensure media transparency and accountability that establish protective measures for moderate, value-centered reporting. They must also promote participation in the public discourse without repercussions or censorship, ensuring equal rights for diverse voices. In conclusion, as we commemorate the recent United Nations World Press Freedom Day, I would like to draw attention to the urgent need for checks and balances across media ecosystems. Mononarrative targeting minorities create considerable, unnecessary human suffering. The Taijimen case in Taiwan is an egregious example for this spiral of intolerance. For freedom of expression to flourish, free from harmful effects of both restricted reception and distorted imparting, media pluralism must be preserved. The careful balance of voices is cultivated through legal and regulatory safeguards, open access to public domain information, and the maintenance of a well-informed society whose members are able and both willing to analyze and synthesize the information they receive in a critical manner. Only then can individuals form opinions grounded not in agitation or emotion, but in the preservation of freedoms, the acceptance of plural voices, and the pursuit of a peaceful and harmonious coexistence. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Mark Nemes. And with this excellent paper, we conclude the first session. and it is my pleasure to pass the podium to Willy Fautré, co-founder and director of Human Rights Without Frontiers, which is the co-sponsor of our webinar. And Willy Fautré first will introduce a video on Moritomo Gakuen case in Japan, and then will introduce the Ditsi, or Disciples of Taiji Men, who will offer their testimonies in the second session of the webinar. So Willy Fautré, the floor is you, if only at first for presenting the video.
Thank you, Massimo. And so we will now watch a video about Japanese media, and after that I will also share with you my thoughts about the topic of the day and give the floor to the Dizzy to share their ideas with us.
Japanese media bravely exposes fraud, crack down on corrupt bureaucrats. One day in 2016, a reporter, Long Yi, received a shocking phone call. The Ministry of Finance sold state-owned land to a selected school. The cost of this, however, was not disclosed. There must be some ruse involved. Moreover, the Prime Minister's wife serves as the school's honorary principal. When Long Yi heard it, he anticipated it to be a headline. As a result, he started to investigate. First and foremost, he contacted the Ministry of Finance to inquire about the land's sale price. He was, however, rejected. The school buyer then bypassed his questions as well. After hitting every wall he could find, he discovered that the price of the land was only 1/10 of the price of the surrounding land. Consequently, Long Yi revealed to the world that the Ministry of Finance had sold the land at a low price and colluded with businessmen, sparking widespread debate throughout the country. In response to all those questions, the Prime Minister vehemently denied any involvement in the matter, saying, "If I or my wife is related to this matter, I will definitely resign as Prime Minister and MP." More turbulence unexpectedly ensued. Long Yi went in search of the land purchase documents at the time under unprecedented duress. It was shockingly found that the Ministry of Finance fiddled with these documents. The names of the Prime Minister's wife and other politicians were removed from the documents, and some people had died as a result. The Ministry of Finance clerk was forced to tamper with fake items. It was discovered. His conscience was deeply condemned by the pressure of obeying his superiors' illegal orders. He chose to commit suicide after being attacked by the public and left a letter of his last words. Following the investigation, the finance minister admitted to tampering with documents. As the public's dissatisfaction grew, the Prime Minister admitted to the people, "The public's trust in the administrative system has been shaken. Please accept my heartfelt apologies." Meanwhile, the president of the National Taxation Bureau, who was in charge of land sales at the time, stepped down. So far, the fact that Japanese state-owned land was sold at a low price has been mostly hidden by the massive national black hole. Fortunately, there were still many conscientious media reporters, such as Long Yi, who were willing to bear enormous pressure to report the truth, as well as pay attention to politics and express public opinions. As a result, investigation was conducted and officials were forced to admit their mistakes. They can no longer blatantly abuse their power. The Japanese media even made this story into a TV series in order to raise awareness and public interest. Such dramas, which seek personal gain while causing political and judicial injustice, are staged in every country. Only by upholding the principle of justice and being willing to care about and participate in public affairs can people protect human rights and improve the national system.
Yeah, corruption is now an acute global disease, and as a human rights organization, we are very happy that there are courageous investigation journalists that are revealing such truth and scandals. But unfortunately, not all of them are really abiding by their ethical rules, and that will be the issue that I will share with you from my point of view and also our personal experience with why covering the work of the media in Western Europe in particular. Freedom of thought and expression is at the heart of our democratic values, but words are not mere tools of communication. They can be sparks that ignite fires. Wars begin with words. Genocides begin with words. Every physical war is preceded by a war of words, and every act of violence is rooted in a prior act of verbal aggression. This is what we are increasingly witnessing every day in the war against certain religious and spiritual minorities, including in our democratic countries. Unscrupulous journalists and media outlets manipulate words, twist them, distort them, and even torture them to use them as weapons of destruction against peaceful religious and spiritual groups simply because they don't like them. Even worse, they do not hesitate to create headlines with outright lies just to damage their reputation. Here are two, in fact, very recent examples among many others. In France, in a case involving the rape of two teenage girls, the TV channel France 3, France 3, surprisingly headlined its news report on the 24th of April with the headline, and I quote, "A man from the Jehovah's Witness community traveled 1,000 kilometers to rape two teenage girls in Quimper," the name of the city, unquote. In fact, it was not true that the sexual abuser was a Jehovah's Witness. And the French TV channel itself was saying in the core of its own article that the perpetrator had been expelled from the Jehovah's Witnesses community a long time ago for being sentenced twice in other cases of sexual assault to lengthy prison terms, 6 years and 7 years. It is unusual for journalists and media to mention the religious affiliation of a perpetrator. And one can question the reason and the motivation of this choice by the editor-in-chief of the French TV channel. Such a headline is sensational, but also destructive for a whole community. It's not just reader baiting by the media, it reinforces the stigmatization of an entire religious group. Suspicion, hostility, hate speech, and hate crimes. It also negatively attracts the attention of the political authorities, maybe with the hope that they will sanction the group with specifically restrictive administrative measures or laws. no word by anyone was expressed to protest against this destructive stigmatization. Would a media outlet have dared to say, for example, the same thing about a Jewish or a Muslim perpetrator of a sexual crime? I doubt it, really. Another example, again in France, 3 months ago, the Cassation Court, which had been seized by Jehovah's Witnesses, issued a judgment in a case indirectly related to an infanticide by suffocation committed 6 years ago, and for which the young mother had been sentenced to 25 years of imprisonment. On the eve of the court hearing, the famous press agency AFP, Agence France Presse, was writing that the mother was, quote, a member of the Jehovah's Witnesses, describing herself as very devout, unquote. Far from being anecdotal, this reference was prominently placed by the tabloid 20 Minutes in the subtitle of its article as follows, quote, infanticide, a member of Jehovah's Witnesses. The accused faces life imprisonment, unquote. It was, however, not true. Once more, one can wonder why a journalist of a French well-known press agency published such non-existent information, and why it was important in his eyes to mention the alleged religious affiliation in this family tragedy. The Christian Federation of Jehovah's Witnesses in France decided to exercise a right of reply regarding the incorrect mention of their religious community in a criminal case. They sent a very factual right of reply to the editors concerned in order to put an end to this attack on their honor. They asked them, politely as usual, to publish this rectification that I will quote. Contrary to what was published in your media outlet, the person convicted by the Finistère Assize Court for the murder of her 5-year-old son is not a Jehovah's Witness, unquote. Most of them agreed to publish it, except 20 Minutes and Paris Match, two very popular tabloids. This failure reveals an intentional hate speech. In its fight for justice and truth, Jehovah's Witnesses took the case to court, as high as the Cassation Court. In a final decision, the judges dismissed their claim, finding that the legal entity of the Jehovah's Witnesses was not named or identified as such in the controversial articles. At two levels in this case, the religious community was penalized, both the press and the judiciary. This happens quite often, not only in France, but also in many other European democratic countries, despite the democratic safeguards that we have. Taiji Men has a long experience of the disregard of truth by the media and of justice by the courts. In 1996, the media started to portray them as tax delinquents running activities that were financially deceptive. They were said to lie, to cheat with the tax administration. They were accused of being a cult-like group, to be superstitious and dangerous. Reporting was biased or sensationalized, and they were stigmatized publicly. This harassment and bashing campaign, which lasted for years, deeply damaged their reputation and social standing, even though later court decisions fully cleared the group of any criminal wrongdoing. But in the meantime, Dr. Hong, his wife, and those in charge of the management of the community had been personally vilified in the media and had spent several months in prison despite their innocence. Taijimen and the Desi survived this ordeal, but the scars are still keenly felt, and it's the case for so many people. So, thank you for your attention to the thoughts and the ideas that I have just shared with you. And now we will really start with our second session, where we give the floor to the Dizzy. And the first one is Zona Chen, an educator. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Willie. Hello, everyone. My name is Zona. I'm an educator. World Press Freedom Day is not only a commemoration, but also a reminder that press freedom is a core value that needs to be continuously protected. Press freedom is the cornerstone of a democracy society. The media must be able to operate independently, expose the truth, and even monitor the government. Recently, seeing regional conflicts and wars frequently in international news has made me even more aware of the importance of peace. My 师父, Dr. Hong Daozi, 掌门人 of 太极门, he led his 弟子 to visit 122 countries around the world for decades, promoting a culture of love and peace and conscience, hoping that the world can return to a peaceful world without war, pain, fear, or sorrow. Taijimen has promoted the culture of love and peace and conscience for decades. The Taijimen case has dragged on 30 years without a true redress. Initially, because then prosecutor Hou Kuanren violated the principle of confidentiality investigations. Without verification, the media extensively report all kinds of false accusations unfavorable to Taijimen. We were misunderstood by others. In fact, Taijimen is innocent. On July 13, 2007, the third instant ruling of the criminal court specified that Taijimen is not guilty. Taijimen did not commit tax evasion and did not violate the Tax Collection Act. Those earlier falsely detained Taijimen Dizi and Zhang Menren were ruled to be compensated by the nation. All things prove that the Taijimen case was a fake case. Until now, it has been 3 decades. Rene Wadlow, president of the United Nations NGO World Citizen Association, pointing out that when nation power divides for justice in the tax system or judicial operations, global citizens should not remain silent. The rule of law needs both stability and responsiveness. If it can correct system error and provide effective remedies, it will lose its true soul and value. The issue raised by the Taijimen case have transcended a single group, involving the exercise of administrative power, the legitimacy of judicial procedures, and the feasibility of remedies. When new facts emerge or the original decision is proven wrong, then should be machine seems to ensure that justice is served. There is not only a legal responsibility, but also a moral one. Yang Junjie, Distinguished Professor of the Department of Finance and Law at National Zhongzheng University. According to the Spring Administrative Course Judgment Number 422 of 2018, the Taijimen case has new facts and new evidence, meeting the requirements for retrial and complying with Article 128 of the Administrative Procedure Act, which allows for the resumption of proceedings. The administrative agency can also revoke the erroneous tax bill according to Article 117 of the Administrative Procedure Act. The nation should apologize to Taijimen for the administrative error. I'm a Taijimen. My Shifu told us to distinguish right from wrong and have conscience. The Taijimen case was a fake case, and it should be resolved immediately. In my work, I often remind my students that if they make a mistake, they should correct it and not repeat it. But the Taiwanese government makes mistakes again and again and refusing to correct them. I think it isn't a democracy and rule of law country should be. Lin Wenzhou, an adjunct professor in Department of Finance and Law at National Zhongzheng University, emphasized that Taiwan incorporate the two conventions into its national law in 2009. He hopes the courts can implement the principle of effective remedies under this convention, fulfilling their function of judicial redress and restoration, and broadly correcting administrative decisions. Only in this way can Taiwan's judicial remedies and the protection of taxpayers' human rights withstand international security regarding the implementation of two conventions. In my educational work, I told my students that conscience and peace are very important. One student shared a story about seeing someone drop money in a restaurant. He initially intended to take the money away, thinking of the teacher once told him to have conscience. He returned the money to that person. If everyone is willing to uphold conscience and peace, the world will experience a virtuous cycle, benefiting everyone. Freedom of the press requires the practice of conscience to prevent the misuse of fake news to mislead the public and to avoid exploiting human weakness for fraud. In this area of advanced information and technology, peace and conscience are truly more important than ever. I urge the Taiwanese government to uphold their conscience, respect and abide by the court's judgment, resign the illegal tax bills, redress the Taijimen case, return the sacred land of Taijimen, and clear Taijimen Shifu and Dizi's name. Finally, may conscience, peace, freedom, and human rights coexist with the world. May people enjoy a peaceful, healthy and happy life. Thank you.
Thank you, Zoda Chen, for sharing with us the opinions of two experts saying there is still some legal space for fully solving the Taijimen case. And one of them stressing that Article 128 and 117 of the Administrative Procedure Act provide such a space for the presumption, for the resumption of proceedings, judicial redress, and restoration. And you are right to stress at the end that the freedom of the press requires the practice of conscience to prevent the misuse of fake news to mislead the public. Thank you again. And now I will give the floor to Amanda Xiao, a factory planner. The floor is yours, Amanda.
Thanks, Willie. Hello, everyone, and it's a pleasure to be here today. I work at a technology company building high-performance chips and platforms that drive the AI revolution. Being on the front lines, I've seen the incredible convenience and progress this technology brings. But there's another side to the story. When we rely too heavily on AI, we don't just gain efficiency. We risk losing something essential, our ability to think critically and trust our own judgment. And if we are not careful, these powerful tools can be turned into weapons used to spread misinformation faster than ever. In 2025, on World Press Freedom Day, the United Nations issues a joint statement titled Reporting in the Brave New World: The Impact of Artificial Intelligence on Press Freedom and the Media. It highlights the critical truth. AI is a double-edged sword. It can enhance the speed and accuracy of how information is delivered and verified, but it can also be used to spread misinformation or enable surveillance. In the end, the issue isn't the technology itself, it's how we choose to use it, how we hold it accountable, and whether we maintain the ability to tell right from wrong. Separately from the executive, legislative, and judicial branches, the media is often referred to as the fourth estate. It serves as a public trust, an institution meant to hold power accountable on behalf of the people. Protected by the Constitution, the media's core responsibility is to report facts objectively, provide accurate information, and serve as a check on government power, helping to sustain a healthy democracy. But unfortunately, that responsibility is not always upheld. In the Taijimen case, instead of fulfilling its role, parts of the media became a tool for shaping public opinion under the influence of those in power. At the time, I was still in college. Native coverage about Taijimen dominated newspaper headlines and TV broadcasts. Even while having lunch at a small street store, I was surrounded by one-sided, misleading reports. When my classmates found out that I practiced Qigong at Taijimen, they looked at me differently. There was whispers, pointing fingers, even mocking comments. I wasn't good with words to begin with, and I didn't know how to express myself. I gradually became more quiet, keeping everything to myself, and quietly heard. Despite of the overwhelming public pressures, I chose to stay, because what I experienced firsthand was very different. I saw the care my Shifu showed to his deeds, and I trust what I knew to be true. The Taijimen was not what the media described. Then, on July 13, 2007, the court ruled that Taijimen was innocent, not guilty, no tax evasion, and no violation of tax law. but the media never fully correct the story. As a result, many people remain stuck with those early negative impressions. That kind of public pressure became a form of fake, invisible bullying, leaving lasting scars on me and on those close to me. Working at the cutting edge of the rapidly evolving AI industry, I've come to more deeply understand that in an age of information overload, both media and technology have the power to amplify influence on the massive scale. When information becomes a tool for shaping public opinion, the line between truth and misinformation can shift in an instant. Looking back at the Taijiman case, I personally experienced how, when the media fails in its responsibility to verify facts and maintain balanced reporting, public opinion can turn into a weapon that harms innocent people. And malicious intent hidden behind keyboards can be amplified without limit. And when public authorities fail to stand firmly for justice, errors can be repeated, reinforced, and amplified within the system. This is not just a lesson from the past. It is a challenge we must confront in the age of AI. As technology allows information to travel faster and farther than ever before, the question is whether we also have the ability to ensure that truth goes deeper and lasts longer. Ultimately, whether it's the media or AI, those are only tools. What truly determines their direction is always human intentions and conscience. In a time of constant change, I've come to understand that justice does not simply happen on its own. It requires continuous commitment and protection. For many years, my Shifu has led deeds to over 122 countries, sharing the message of love, peace, and conscience. Someone once asked, can love and peace really be achieved? And the answer was simple. As long as we act, there is hope. Those words have become a guiding belief for me throughout Taijiman's 30 years journey for justice. Along the way, I've come to understand even more deeply that only by standing firm in truth and holding the line of justice can wrongdoing be seen and real justice have a chance to be achieved. I hope that in today's world, where information is power, whether it is the media, public authorities, or individuals who receive information, we can all choose with conscience. In doing so, information can become a bridge to truth rather than an amplifier of bias. Only then can our society move toward a future that is more just, transparent, and trustworthy. Thanks for your attention.
Yeah, your analysis, Amanda, of the interaction between the media and the reality of the facts and the journalists in between aligns, in fact, with our analysis, which is based on a long experience of contacts with victims of some media. Press people who do not act in accordance with their conscience make victims. It's a reality. And words can destroy people psychologically, professionally, and socially, and in their own family. Words can also kill directly and indirectly, as it was shown by Massimo in his presentation. Journalists must be put under moral pressure to follow their conscience and not the readership or the audimat. This is what we do at Human Rights Without Frontiers by diplomatically providing journalists with accurate and responsible information and analysis about specific religious groups. And if instead they follow the logic of the markets rather than their conscience, this should be highlighted. And that is also what we denounce publicly by naming and shaming in the worst cases. So now I will give the floor to Jeffrey Hung, a college student. The floor is yours.
Hello everyone, I'm Joffrey and interior design student in college. It's a great honor to be here on WordPress Freedom Days, uh, a significant day to share my perspective on trust, human rights, and justice from my viewpoints of the younger generations and design students. Uh, in my professional files, the core of interior design lies in space planning and problem solving. Uh, Before any design begins, we must understanding the weather, geographic, and local cultures, providing evidence-based and authentic data as a reference for solving problems on a design floor plan, blueprints, every parameters must be precise and uh, every structure must be honest because any false data could lead to collapse. So I believe this is also aligns perfectly with the value of press freedoms. Press freedom is the cornerstone of the uh, democratic society. The media must expose the trust and monitor the governments. However, when public authorities manipulate informations and media is reduced to tools for spreading misinformations, the structure of social justice becomes as dangerous and um, untrustworthy as full data. So I want to analyze the impact of falsifications from a professional perspective. Uh, in design, if a personal data is falsified, it may only affect the occupants of a single space, leading to maybe collapse the ceilings or water leakage, and that is a personal uh, tragedy. But if that initiators of data falsification is a country, the consequences are disasters. And when it imagines if that nation's hydrogeological service reports were forged for specific interest, and that would be the worst case. If a government hides data indicating that region lies on the server's geological fault line, just a forced development through an administrative procedure, the consequences will be built on the false foundations for an entire cities and if affecting the lives and thousands property. And if once an earthquake occur, it's no longer a problem of a single house, but a large scale destructions of cities. And this is the devastating and disaster caused by country level data falsification. And if the National Tax Authority falls, falsif falsifies taxation data, it is like a designer lying about the structural calculations, so it will collapse. And when a country can't manipulate this true parameters to serve power, people will no longer trust the law. And this kind of legal data's falsifications will trigger a change, reactions throughout the social structure, and the investor will flee, citizens will lose their sense of security, and ultimately it will lead to the total paralysis of a national function. And personally, I have witnessed this human rights disaster uh, has spent its 30 years. Taijimen and ancient Qigong and martial arts cultivation academy was subjected to false um, occasions and illegal taxations in 1996. Even though the Supreme Court reaching a final verdict in 2007, declares that Taijiman is not like guilty and not liable for the taxes, and provided this to be the fake case. The National Taxation Bureau has continued to ignore uh, the judicial rulings, and the events one as far as illegally and forcibly uh, acting off the scarce land and intended for our Shifu and Dizi self-cultivations. And this is the most typical example of a national data's fault, and ignoring the legal facts and using the erroneous tax returns and data to attempt to erase a group's basic human rights. As a design student, I know that if the foundation is built on lie, there will never be rational design. And if the ruling party is power overriding the judicial and administrative relief, is extremely dangerous in a country governed by the rules of law, and leaves leaves the country's administrations without any standard and constraints. As a Taijiman Dizi, I have followed my Sifu, Dr. Hong Daozi, for um, many years, and he teaching us that people must have the conscience and act with the conscience. This leads me retains humanity and remain the staying fast to my conscience, even within the high pressures like maybe the school or workplace competitive environment. Um, um, and in this, as a student, I have a huge feeling of the now eras, in this era, the informations and AI explosion era. The protections of trust has become even more urgent. So the trust is really important. And um, as Amanda already mentioned, how important of the AI. As a student, AI is also closely related to me, and I believe that the humanity is a mode in the AI era, and many people I know and many people worry about that AI will replace the humans, especially some of the job. But like Jason Huang's NVIDIA CEO said, technology can improve efficiency, but it cannot define humanity. in the field of design, AI can certainly help me quickly process a large amounts of data, especially if I want to render the pictures. But if that input data is incorrect, biases, or uh, malicious, AI will only produce false results and at then uh, astonishing speed. And for me, intelligence is a functional things, and humanity is not specified functionally. It's like much bigger words that our life experience, our tolerance for pain, our determinations. Those are different words than intelligence,
Yeah.
despite the intelligence is um, a world that we have elevated to very high forms over times, but like character, humanity, compassion, generosity, all these things, I believe these are real superpower of human, and it's also the precious resource that cannot be replaced by AI. And on this day, come on this day, commemorating freedoms and trust, we do not want to see mistake endlessly re replicated because justice should not just be like beautiful dream on the floor plan, on the blueprint, but the um, but it's the air that people can truly breathe. And finally, like, may conscience, peace, and freedom, and human rights be with all of us, with all the people. And thank you.
Thank you. Well, Jeffrey, uh, yeah, I like the starting point of your presentation, the concept of data falsification from the viewpoint of your future professional expertise, which will be interior design. In the Taijiban case, the Taiwanese state incarnated by its tax administration falsified uh, the tax data of Taijiman, and this had a huge repercussion on many people because the foundation was built on lies, as you said. And when this truth comes to light, then people do not trust their state anymore. And its foundations, the foundations of the state, are under threat of cracking and maybe collapsing. So the same with the interior design, your expertise, in fact. And if a major wall supposed to support another floor is built with bad material, with bad foundation, the construction will also crack and collapse, and nobody will trust the interior design company, which means bankruptcy for it. And so, fighting for honesty of the state is the good fight. And that's the conclusion that I wanted to share with you in my interaction right now. So now we have another speaker, Yu Tingni, software project manager. Floor is yours.
Okay. Sorry, I'm Luna. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
I
you.
know that the names are sometimes
Let's
different
see.
from one language to another.
Thank
Sorry.
you very much. Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm Luna. I'm honored to participate in today's forum and share my insights on human rights. I'm an elementary school teacher and a Taijumen Dizi. The Taijumen fracas occurred in 1996, and as early as 2007, the Supreme Court had already issued a final ruling after 3 trials, declaring Taijumen not guilty and exempt from taxes. But why, even after 30 years, has Taijumen still not been duly exonerated? This reveals a serious problem with Taiwan's tax system. The National Taxation Bureau's power once surpassed the government and the 5 courts, making it an absolute power. This utterly unthinkable in democratic countries. It's clear the people of Taiwan have long suffered from the illegal treatment by the NTB and unable to reverse this bizarre and illegal phenomenon. Taijumen is an ancient manpai of Qigong and martial arts practice. The Zhangmenren Dr. Hong Daozi founded the Taijumen Qigong and Health Association in 1966, a martial arts organization registered with the Ministry of the Interior. It's also a group member of the Taipei Martial Arts Association and the Republic of China Qigong Association. Under Taiwanese law, Qigong and martial arts organizations cannot establish cram schools and are tax exempt. Therefore, Taijumen cannot be a cram school. However, the NTV and the NTB ignored the legal basis, forcibly determined that Taijumen was a cram school in 1992, illegally taxing it, and forcibly seizing the sacred land for self-cultivation in Miaoli, effectively nationalizing it. I believe that a reasonable person can fully aware the illegality of the NTB's actions. As the saying goes, if the upper beam is crooked, the lower beam will be crooked too. I strongly hope that the actions of officials who choose the truth and confuse right and wrong don't set a bad example for our children. In Taiwan, if people receive an illegal tax bill, they can seek verification and correction and administrative remedies, review, appeal, administrative litigation. If a taxpayer files an appeal, the Tax Collection Act stipulates that 1/3 of the tax due must be paid first in order to temporarily prevent the enforcement of property seizure. This is quite a contradiction. People file appeals with the government because they received problematic tax bills. Instead, the government is demanding that the people pay a large sum of money first in order to seek administrative remedies. In fact, people often lose their cases, even when seeking administrative remedies. This violates the core principle of human rights protection. Okay. human rights attention. Yes. Because people file appeals with the government because they should received in order to seek administrative remedies. This violates the core principle of human rights protection in modern rule of law states, that where there's a right, there must be a remedy. I'd also like to share again what Zona just mentioned. On April 1st this year, World Citizenship Day, Taiwan and the international organization jointly held the 2026 World Citizenship Day International Forum, using the Taijumen human rights case as an example. The forum explored whether Taiwan, after codifying the two covenants into domestic law, has fulfilled its national obligation to provide effective remedies. Renee Wadlow, president of the UN NGO World Citizens Association, stated in his address, when state power deviates from justice in taxation or judicial operations, world citizens should not remain silent. The rule of law needs both stability and responsiveness. If it cannot correct systemic errors and provide effective remedies, it will lose its true soul and value. The issues raised in the Taijumen case have transcended a single group, involving the exercise of administrative power, the legitimacy of judicial procedures, and the feasibility of remedies. When new facts emerge or the original decision is proven wrong, there should be mechanisms to ensure that justice is served. This is not only a legal responsibility, but also a moral one. Finally, I call on the Taiwan NTB to revoke the unlawful decision in accordance with Article 117 of the Administrative Procedure Act. Restore justice to the Shifu and the Dizis of Taijumen. Restore justice to the people of Taiwan, and restore the inherent human rights that all people in the world are entitled to. Thank you very much.
And thank you, Luna. Well, you said, and you were quite right, and that the people of Taiwan have really long suffered from the illegal treatment by the National Taxation Bureau and remain powerless to reverse this, and I will quote you, bizarre and illegal action. But you are a teacher. I was a teacher before being retired. We know that this from this position we can build up another future through the children that we educate, because we must teach the children how to make their own judgments based on their psychological needs, to later when they go to school, to higher school education, that they learn how to conduct themselves and interact with others, a vital stage in developing a well-rounded personality, which is important for themselves, for their families that they will build up, but for their social environment as well. And that's why we teachers must really dedicate considerable efforts to guiding children to establish correct values and behaviors through everyday life experiences in the light of one's their individual consciences. And I also like your last quotation by René Wadlow, the president of the UN NGO World Citizens Association, saying when state power deviates from justice in taxation or judicial operations, world citizens should not remain silent. Never remain silent. Take actions in both hands and fight against injustice. Thank you for your message, for your presentation. And I will now give the floor to Jerry Lin, Manager of Technical Service Department at the Japanese company.
Thank you very much, Willie. Hello, everyone. I'm Jerry, Taiji Mendizi, and I worked for a Japanese company that manufactures automotive parts. It's a pleasure for me to join this forum and share my thoughts on press freedom. May 3rd is the World Press Freedom Day, and Taiwan is often seen as a leading example of press freedom in Asia Pacific. But today, I'd like to invite everyone to consider one question. If we have the freedom to speak, yet lose the ability to see the truth and correct the mistakes, is something missing from the freedom? If a society focuses only on surface level freedom of speech while ignoring deeper structural issues rooted in its authoritarian past, democracy can become hollow. A case from 30 years ago, the 1219 Taijimen case continues to cause suffering even today. This is not just a legal or a tax issue. It is also a test for Taiwan's press freedom. When power goes unchecked, can the fourth estate truly fulfill its role to hold the government accountable? Let's go back to 1996, a turning point when Taiwan had just lifted martial law and democracy was beginning to take shape. On December 19th, Qigong and Self-Cultivation Group was suddenly raided by prosecutors because of false, anonymous accusations. At the time, press freedom unfortunately became a tool used by those in power. The prosecution openly ignored the rule of confidentiality and fed the media a string of unverified and even ridiculous stories, including claims as raising goblins. In such a one-sided information environment, the media became a megaphone for power. Before any court ruling, innocent people were already judged by society. The trial by media is a painful lesson in what happens when press freedom is used without verification. Justice took time, but it eventually reached a conclusion. After 10 years of legal proceedings, the Supreme Court ruled in 2007 that Taijimen was not guilty, with no tax violation. Compensation was even granted for wrongful imprisonment. By the logic of the rule of law, the story should have ended there, but it did not. The tax authority ignored the court's decision and continued issuing tax bills. We want to raise a few questions. One, why can an administrative agency ignore a final court ruling? Isn't that a violation of the law? Two, why hasn't the media been able to act as an effective check on this kind of power that places itself above the law? There are three perspectives to consider. One, authoritarian legacy. Parts of the bureaucracy still reflect as a rule by man mindset rather than true rule of law, allowing even final court ruling to be disregarded. Second, media challenges. Taiwan ranks high in press freedom, yet public trust in media remains low at only 33%. Political polarization had undue pressure from their boardrooms, weaken its oversight role. Information barriers. Tax issues are highly complex, which creates significant information gap and can give an administrative agency an advantage. In a fragile media environment with low public trust, complex administrative errors are often drawn out by sensational content. This may contribute to reduced public engagement over time and increase vulnerability to misinformation. As someone from a business world, we use the PDCA cycle: plan, do, check, act to manage systems. Each step is connected, and through continuous checking and correction, systems improve. The 1219 case is like a major bug in Taiwan's democratic system. The courts have completed the check. However, administrative authority refused to carry out the act. Instead, it ran in the opposite direction and proceeded with the forced action of private property. This is like a company discovering a critical system error but refusing to fix it. No organization can sustain itself this way. The media should serve as a final firewall and a credibility dashboard of society. When something goes wrong, it should raise the alarm. If errors are no longer tracked and power is not questioned, this firewall fails and public trust may eventually collapse. This story is not distant from our lives. It is closely connected to all of us. Taiwan is a global hub for technology and AI. But if a system allows mistakes to go uncorrected, could the strengths we have built be put at risk? We worked hard and paid taxes because we believe the system is fair. If elements of the rule of man remain, true justice becomes difficult to achieve. A mature democracy must be built on the rule of law, protecting people's rights from unchecked power. This is not just one case. It is a broader risk that could affect everyone. I share this story not to stir anger, but to remind us to act with conscience at the core. Experiences from many countries show that only by facing and correcting mistakes can we move forward. We cannot celebrate press freedom while ignoring long-standing injustice. On this meaningful World Press Freedom Day, I sincerely call on society and the media to exercise their role in oversight and to urge the government to implement Article 117 of the Administrative Procedure Act, showing the courage to correct mistakes and withdraw unlawful tax decisions. Taiwan has world-class technological strengths, and it should also have a world-class rule of law and human rights. If we work together to debug the authoritarian procedure and truly uphold separation of powers and press freedom, we can achieve genuine democracy and justice. Thank you very much for your attention.
Yeah, thank you, Jerry. Your statement is so provoking, and your arguments are clear. Press freedom must go beyond surface level expression to include truth seeking and accountability. And there are many discussions now about what is truth. Yeah, and there are no truth. There are all sorts of truths, so I will not go into that sort of debate. But you effectively use the Taijimen case as a concrete long-term example to illustrate systemic flaws, making the issue tangible rather than something abstract. And the integration of legal, media, and business perspectives, especially the PDCA that you mentioned, adds originality and clarity, and it also balances critique with a constructive call to action, urging reform without sounding purely accusatory. You said that very, very clearly. So overall, your statement is really persuasive, and I'm sure that your message will be fully heard. Thank you very much to everybody, to each of you, to all of you, for your contribution to this interesting debate on that important day where we celebrate the freedom of expression, freedom of the press, and the media. And I'm giving back the floor and the mic, the virtual mic, to Massimo.
Thank you. And for the last part of the webinar, I'm immediately passing the podium to Marco Respinti, an Italian scholar, journalist, director in charge of Bitter Winter, who will first offer some conclusions and second launch our usual final musical video, this time on human rights. So Marco Respinti, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Massimo, and thank you everyone for this important contribution, yet more food for the brain and arguments for truth on this daring case, the Taijimen case. It is my privilege today to draw some conclusion, and I will go by quoting Italian writer Alessandro Manzoni, who's pretty famous, Italian author of a novel, I Promessi Sposi, whose title in English is The Betrothed. The definitive edition was published between 1840 and 1842. But later in life, Manzoni authored an essay entitled in Italian La rivoluzione francese del 1789 e la rivoluzione italiana del 1859, which can be translated as the French Revolution of 1789 and the Italian Revolution of 1859. He composed it between 1862 and 1864, revising it repeatedly and leaving it unfinished. Actually, the second part of the announcing the title was never basically developed. And it appeared posthumously in 1889 in a very nice edition, which I had the privilege to see with my eyes in a public library here in Milan, my town. In this text, Manzoni delivers a forceful indictment of the French Revolution dating from 1789 to 1799. One of the sharpest and wittiest treatises he penned is addressed to the philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau and to Emmanuel Joseph Seyé. The first is considered one of the most influential thinkers of the time that preceded and prepared the French Revolution. The latter, a defrocked Catholic priest who later passed through several opportunistic party switches, was one of the most able ideologues of the period. Both are responsible for elaborating what can easily be called the doctrine of the general will. While the French expression volonté générale, really belongs to Rousseau. Each of the two contributed to its substance. In their able rhetoric, unmasked by Manzoni, some becomes all, and a few becomes everyone. Subsequently, the voice of a faction grants itself the authority to represent first a majority and then easily the totality. Once they reach political power, often by dubious means, this minority takes the lead and imposes its will on the whole people of the country by claiming to represent their true feelings and mind. From this lineage emerge political vanguards and parties that claim to speak as oracles of the people, even arrogating to themselves the right to use violence to impose the good of all upon dissenters. Having turned a deaf ear to Manzoni's warning, the violent history of revolutions, communist, national socialist, and fascist, you name it, has sadly demonstrated how this happens in practice. A strong aid to revolution and their violent vanguards has constantly been provided by propaganda, through which factions and parties have ended up convincing the people that parts rightly speak for the whole, and when they did not succeed in convincing, they forced this false truth upon people. We now live in a world where media, which should by vocation be the watchdogs of democracy, have reinvented themselves as instruments of propaganda, at least many times, often. These reasons for doing so are legion, and not all of them have theoretical dignity, but one stands above the others. The media are convinced that they are the source of truth instead of its means, and when not the source, they believe themselves to be so close to that source as to be its authorized mouthpiece. This behavior also has an explanation. Their power greatly increased in illiterate societies and in contexts where the very concept of truth is regarded as obsolete, gives them the conviction that they know it better than others, than the majority, than the antiquated reality common sense suggests. In a word, media in a relativistic society act like the factions and parties of Rousseau and Sayet, exposed by Manzoni. They know it. They know it. They believe they are entitled to impose their truth and re-educate everyone accordingly. This is particularly evident and staggering in democratic societies where consensus is everything, and in the most delicate field of all, precisely because it concerns the most intimate and intangible political right of human beings, religious liberty. It is tempting to imagine that the enemies of religious liberty lurk in the shadows, elusive and hard to name. In truth, they act in daylight and are drearily predictable, wearing the familiar garments of our age. In newspapers, on TV, radio, the internet, and social media, the press magnifies the dynamics of the contemporary secular state, with its intricate bureaucracy composed of ministries, fiscal authorities, and regulatory commissions, and is constantly supported by anti-cult campaigners who know it better than anyone else. In this upside-down world, where guarantors of freedom until proven guilty beyond any reasonable doubt turn into instigators of repression and often in its torturers, the case of Tang Jimen in the Republic of China and Taiwan is always revealing. I already had the occasion to cite an instructive example in Italy, my country. I wish to repeat it here. The television series Un Passo dal Cielo, One Step from the Sky, produced a few years ago by the public broadcaster RAI, the state TV, and widely appreciated for its tone of moral clarity and human warmth, introduced in later seasons a figure cast as the archetypal leader of a cult, implicated, of course, in serious crimes. The group is, of course, invented, but the pattern is not. It gathers in a single narrative threads the elements in a single narrative thread, the elements that audiences have learned to associate with the very word cult: secrecy, manipulation, latent violence. The choice is not narratively necessary in that TV show. It is culturally legible. And that is precisely the point. What is familiar persuades without argument. Take Taijumen and all the misrepresentations elaborated in everyday narratives by media that know it better. They are so pervasive that people on the streets now think they know it all. The point is that too often the media work like TV inventions of the worst kind. The result of this pervasive disinformation is evident. Taijumen has been obliged to pay the price of its innocence for 30 years, and it is not finished yet. This is in front of everyone's eyes, but everyone chooses to close their ears. I wonder why our democratic and evolved world can be so insensitive to true suffering. I fear the answer is so deep that it cannot be given in a single lecture, not even one delivered by the master of prose, Alessandro Manzoni. And with this, I conclude my conclusion, and I thank all the organizers, speakers, DZ, scholars who animated our webinars today, and all the audience following us online. And I had only to salute everyone now by launching a final musical video. Thank you.